What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Star Wars Explained. Today, we are going to talk about the new novel Cataclysm. There will be spoilers ahead. The book came out about a week ago, but still, just in case you haven't finished it, we are going to be talking spoilers with the author of the book. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Lydia Kang.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, before we get started, and I always make this mistake because we talk backstage and I tell you off camera how much I really, really loved the book. But I want to say it again for people watching that I thought Cataclysm was such a great read, so much fun.
That is awesome. Awesome to hear. It's I've been seeing a lot of positive talk about it recently, and it just makes me so happy because you put all this work and energy and blood, sweat, and tears, and you just want to write a good story and make people sort of on the edge of their seat. So thank you very much. I'm so glad to hear you like it.
The one thing that I knew that this book was really special was because so much Star Wars stuff is coming out right now, and I had to do a live stream about The Mandalorian, and that was scheduled, and I was like, I have to put the book down, but I was in the middle of something really good, and I was like, no. I have to go talk about more Star Wars, but I want to stick with this Star Wars.
Yeah. We I remember like writing some of the end of those chapters and being like, yeah, that's a good place to end. People are going to want to keep going. So excellent. Mission accomplished.
Well, obviously, we're going to talk a lot about the book, but I have always an icebreaker question that I ask new people on the channel, and that question is, who is your favorite underappreciated or lesser known Star Wars character? Basically, as long as it's not a main character from the films or the TV series. I love to hear what kind of background characters different people enjoy in the fandom.
So I think anybody who has read the From a Certain Point of View from The Empire Strikes Back, they're going to know my answer, which is, so it would be like the medical personnel in the stories, because like people are getting blaster shots and all sorts of injuries, and there's you don't really get to see a lot of what happens in the background about how people get better. And so it was fun being able to talk about 21B, which is the medical surgical droid that puts Luke Skywalker's cybernetic hand on. But like, there's also the FX7 and these other medical personnel. I would love to see more spinoffs of like, what happens in those scenarios, because they're pretty important moments that are usually off screen.
I really like that answer, and it doesn't have to be just 21B, but just the doctors in general that you.
Mm-hmm.
My collecting persona is that I will just collect anything and everything about those characters, like Max Rebo, Biggs Darklighter. But you could just collect all the doctors. You have 21B, FX7, Colonia from Force Awakens. That's super fun. What is it about the medical personnel that attracts you to them?
Well, I think just that they tend to be happening at these really linchpin moments, right? When like somebody's hurt, someone's on it's sort of life or death, and that's where a lot of characters, these moments happen that can really change them and can change the story. But a lot of times they happen off scene or just like really quickly before they sort of move on. That's sort of why I would love to see more of that.
I love that as a more all-around answer. Just all the medical personnel of Star Wars deserve more attention.
Yeah, and I'm biased. Like I'm a physician, and so this is like what I do in my day job. So that's why I'm like a little biased. I'm like, oh, it's all the unsung heroes out there who are like doing all this work in the background. They have great stories. So yeah, I'm totally biased there.
I think that's okay. We all are.
Yeah.
Well, I've been lucky enough in the past, as the High Republic Phase 1 was coming out, I was able to speak with all 5 of the Lumineers, as you called them in your acknowledgments. But what was the process like for you and Tessa Gratton and Zoraida Cordova and George Mann to come in and write for the second phase and join the team?
It was really interesting because, I was nervous about it. I had written only a little bit for Star Wars. I had not done a novel before. And I knew this entire endeavor was this big juggernaut of, the Lumineers, these story architects, and so many players sort of behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, at Del Rey, and Disney. And I was just this new person entering in. So it was a little nerve-wracking for me, but at the same time, like I knew Claudia Gray and I knew Justina Ireland and Tessa Gratton from the young adult publishing world. So we'd like known of each other and had done events together in the past. And so they were not complete strangers to me, but other people were. And I was just so pleased to see they were so welcoming, and they were like, they reached out and they're just like, you have any questions, ask. And this is really overwhelming, and, no question is too silly. And they were just incredible to work with. And I have to say, this doesn't always happen in publishing. There's always players that are difficult to get along with, or that can happen. And my entire process has been just really wonderful people, really friendly, really supportive. It's just been so positive. So I can't say enough about the process. It's been wonderful.
Did they like bring you into a room full of whiteboards and like Daniel Jose Older is pointing at dinosaurs and talking about like what the High Republic is? How did you get all caught up on this new side of the universe?
Well, there's some like very large Zooms happening, like, a lot of coordinated conversations about making sure things match up, and problem solving stuff. There's we have a Slack channel where we're like chatting about things all the time, and so there's a lot of conversations that happen to make sure that we all coordinate. And sometimes we like maybe just two of us will have to like sort of go off and like problem solve things. So like Kevin, Scott, and I have had to work a lot together because many of the things that happen in Path of Vengeance and Cataclysm are contemporaneous. So we had to make sure things matched up, and that involved an extremely long and arduous Google Doc. So things like that, just lots of conversations and problem solving. And time changes also because he's in the UK, I'm in the Midwest, and so sometimes like he'd be doing things when I'm like, Kevin, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to be sleeping right now, and he's like, I can't help it, I gotta figure this out. So it's been an adventure for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure it was daunting to tackle this era, but do you think there were any advantages to being a fresh voice for Phase 2?
Yeah, I think so. I have this kind of habit of when I have written many things where I kind of don't know what I'm doing. Like I've written a bunch of like historical novels that were like mysteries, and like I wasn't extremely well read in the historical novel mystery genre. I just had a story and I just sort of put it out there. And so I sometimes jump headlong into complicated writing projects without having an extensive history of doing them. And so that's kind of what it was like for me to write Cataclysm. I hadn't written Star Wars novels before. I tend to screw up a lot of the little details about, when to capitalize this and what terminology to use for that. And so that was really nerve-wracking for me. But luckily, Phase 1 had happened, and they basically were like my textbooks. And so I was reading through Phase 1 and really absorbing the characters and loving the characters and the storyline. And so a lot of the heavy lifting, I feel like, was done well before I got there, and it made it easier for me to step in. And obviously my novel is the sequel to Convergence. And so Zoraida and I were sort of working at the same time. She was writing Convergence, and I was trying to figure out what was going to happen in Cataclysm. So we were having tons of conversations together about, characters and, what's going to happen here and what's going to happen there. So it was a lot of just ongoing conversations and coordinating. And it was pleasant the whole time because I get to work with these like amazing people, and they're super nice and friendly and fun to work with. So, but yeah, it was a little chaotic at times. It was great though.
You bring up the fact that Cataclysm is a direct sequel to Convergence, and something I have appreciated about Phase 2 that I felt was a little different from Phase 1 is that every book seems to be a part 1 and a part 2. I have not read Quest for Planet X or Path of Vengeance yet, but just the titles alone being Convergence, Cataclysm, Quest for the Hidden City, Quest for Planet X, Path of Deceit, Path of Vengeance. Reading Cataclysm, it definitely felt like a payoff for all of the buildup of Convergence, which was super fun.
Yes, and Battle of Jeddah, which is another,
yeah.
It's that middle audiobook in between, which was so it was thought out to be done in that way. it's great because if you're sort of like, I just want to read YA and you want to just read Path of Vengeance and Path of Deceit, you can just do that and have this really great bite of this world and a really satisfying arc. And if you want to read the adult novels, you can do it that way. If you want to do middle grade, so that was conceived of for that reason. It was so that if you want all of it, you can have all of it. If you want a piece of it, you won't be confused because you're like, well, I don't understand what's going on here because like half the characters are somewhere else. It's just I love that it was done that way, and I think it makes it really fun for readers too, so they can have as little or as much as they want, including the graphic novels and all that kind of stuff.
And thank you for bringing up Battle of Jeddah, because having listened to that, just the opening pages of Cataclysm, where they're trying to figure out, wait, what happened at Jeddah? What's going on? And just having that knowledge and being like, oh, this book is going to be chaotic in the best way.
Yeah.
It from the start just had me tense up and lean in. And something else that I think helped drive that tension, Star Wars fans sometimes joke about how technology in Star Wars never really changes throughout the history of the universe. But I think Cataclysm is one of the first times I actually felt the limitations of technology, especially with communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that the Jedi could not really communicate with one another. And you see all of these characters starting to head towards Dalna independently, and you're like, oh no. Was that a conscious effort to make this period 150 years earlier than the first phase feel technologically different?
Yeah, and it's you sort of look at the evolution of the Republic, and it wasn't sort of always like that, and the galaxy wasn't always so interconnected, and you're like, well, when did that happen? And so it was really fun to be able to have that be a part of this phase where you had these pathfinders trying to seek out all these different ways to get from here to there, and that being said, the lack of communication, I feel like communication in and of itself is a character in this novel because it is wreaking havoc. Sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not working. And, people speaking to one another, there are these huge moments that happen when conversations happen a little too late, or conversations happen when you don't expect them to. So yeah, communication was something that we played around with a lot, knowing that the galaxy is not terribly interconnected. And that's what the chancellors are trying to do. They're really trying to string together, these worlds and bring them into the Republic, but they're still kind of new at it, and they're working with the Jedi, and that's a relatively new relationship, and that's something you don't see, later on in the Star Wars as we know it right now. So this sort of prequel era, we get to play around with that as a problem, and it adds to some really great plot moments, I think.
I think so too. I thought it was so fun seeing all these different people like, Dalna is probably where we need to go for evidence. And then this other group is like, we need to head to Dalna. And just knowing from phase one that something happened on Dalna and that they're all heading towards a cataclysm.
All paths lead to Dalna. Exactly.
Which that was just the linchpin for this story of once it starts, it does not stop. It reminded me of Cavan Scott's The Rising Storm, is that once violence explodes, it can't be contained. Well, the phase two is supposed to be 150 years before phase one, so the Republic and the Jedi are even more in their golden age. But what was it like writing what could be the beginning of the end for that? The Battle of Dalna was a rough time for the Jedi and the Republic, and I think we know that it ripples out into phase one. So what was the most fun part about writing maybe the worst part of this period in time?
God, that's a good question. There were so many different things that I enjoyed about writing that I remember when I sort of got to that point of writing in the rough draft, and I had this sort of all like storyboarded out, and it was just overwhelming. And I remember just sort of like taking these deep breaths and being like, okay, I have to like do this part, but there's so many things happening and there's so much chaos. And I felt this sort of like stress of like, am I going to be able to do this okay? And I think the fact that I was like so worried about it, and I was just putting my characters through these like terrible moments, and then I just kept having to make it worse and worse and worse. And I'm like, the fact that it feels so bad to have to put them through this is a good sign for me. So, so yeah, the process itself was really, really fun. I think it was really great to push some of these really iconic characters to their limit. So spoiler: Creighton's son is featured in a major way in this book, and you have this sort of a feeling that this is a guy who really is really settled in who he is and his relationship with the Force, his who he is as a Jedi, and we cracked that a little bit in Battle of Jeddah. Like, some things were going wrong and he didn't feel really great about it. And he comes off from Battle of Jeddah feeling like, I don't think we did the best job that we could. And and then everything gets sort of worse. And so I think pushing some of these characters to their limits was this sounds so mean. It was really wonderful to do, because then you really get to that nugget of like the soul of that person, and like, what are they really about? Like when they are stripped of everything, of like, their security, of sometimes their physicality, they're under so much emotional strain, like what comes out from that? And I love those moments. And so we do that with Creighton's son. We do that with Master Yaddle. And so many of these other characters, Axel and Gela, go through this. For sure, Chancellor Greylark, I think, is one of those people who like gets just pulled to the point where there is nothing left but like sort of like her bones, and she's sort of like, what is left of me? What can I do? And so those were I think the moments that were also really, really hard to write, but were a joy to write, because you get to know these characters in such an intimate way, and you force them to make these decisions and find out what kind of a person they really are.
I'm glad you bring up the Chancellor, because I thought that was such a simple solution to her problem that I didn't see coming, of the fact that she would just resign her chancellorship for Axel. Like, and I know that the mother also did not see that coming, that she just couldn't understand why someone would let go of that power. But I thought that was such a cool, like, fist pump moment of her coming to just be there as a mother for her son. That was great.
Yeah, and that was like, it was a really when I decided like I was going to do that, I remember being like, I hope this isn't going to be really obvious. But then the way that the Chancellor is set up throughout most of the story, Kyung Greylark is just this indomitable force. Like, she has complete control over what she does. She never, like, I don't think she ever sweats. Like, I don't think there was ever a single like drop of perspiration on her brow, because this lady has it like just so contained, and so it is, it's the last thing that you expect her to do. And at the same time, it's probably one of the most frightening things she ever does, right? Because she is relinquishing control, and she's facing the thing that like is probably one of the hardest thing that most people have to face, which is, this raw, very, broken relationship you have with somebody that you love. That's like the hardest thing to deal with. It's not running a galaxy, it's like fixing past hurts, right? So yeah, so that was fun. I put her through the ringer for sure.
and the Jedi as well. I think it's really interesting seeing them at this point where the Sith Wars ended like 600 years earlier. They haven't really been tested and pushed to the limit, like you say. And a lot of that in this book comes down to the Leveler, which is always something terrifying to read about. So what is it about those creatures that, they are terrifying? No matter how many times I read about them in Phase 1, the comics, anytime one pops up, I'm like just chilled to the core, really. I'm so scared for what's going to happen.
Right. I think that one of the most frightening things about anything is when you don't know what you're up against, right? So that was probably like my biggest fear when I was going through residency, was like when I was starting a new rotation, like in the ICU or something like that, I'd be terrified because I didn't know what it would be like to be there. What you don't know is more scary than actually showing up and doing something. And the leveler, I feel like, that's a terrible metaphor, but the leveler is basically encompasses all these horrible things that you can't control because there's a lack of information about them. And that's one of the scariest things. But also knowing that the little bits and pieces that come in, the little tiny bits of information, are that they are incredibly dangerous, and not just dangerous, but so dangerous to the Jedi in particular. So I had to be kind of careful about how I addressed the leveler, because a lot of what happens we don't get to see in Cataclysm. So it remains a little bit of a mystery, but it's this sort of like terrifying mystery, and you don't exactly know what's going on. But you see the leveler in Cataclysm, and it's like, I remember I have the drawings in front of me of sort of the concept art and stuff like that, and I'm just like, this thing is just awful. It's just so scary looking. So I had to make sure that I put that on the page. And Bino Olo, he's the one who sort of sees it and feels like just awful around it too, because for reasons. Yeah, like I love the concept of this creature. I just got to give it to, the story architects for coming up with this idea, because it was brilliant and terrifying. So much fun to write, and also like not write, because I had to be I sort of dance around, what was going on with that creature.
Well, that's such a cool way to put it, that you're right. Cataclysm, it's like a lot of flashes, and the Jedi are like, what was that? Our people are turning into husks. We don't know why. Like, readers, if you read phase 1, are like, oh, we know why. So it's a little extra terrifying for us. But I think it's interesting that you say they're so scary because they are unknown. And then at the end of this story, Yoda and Creighton are kind of like, maybe we should keep this under wraps for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of ripples out into a problem for the phase 1 Jedi, because then we see Cyan Holt and Emmerich Captor are investigating what this thing is, and it's like, oh, someone could have told you.
I know, and it's and that's a conscious decision that
Mm-hmm.
Creighton and Yoda make, and it's born out of this, again, it's born out of fear. And so sometimes when again, like there's information they don't know, they recognize that this is like a huge threat that could decimate the Jedi Order if it gets into the wrong hands. And if people are like, ooh, let's go find that weapon of Jedi destruction, that would be like terrible. So yeah, so they make a really difficult decision at the time, but it's a moment that has major repercussions for phase 1 and phase 3. So that will be fun for everybody to see.
It's so great when you see a decision that is going to cause problems later, but like, I understand why they made the decision. So that was very well done. I also wanted to talk about Axel Greylark, because he seems to be just a universally loved character that you and Sir Rita created and wrote to be so compelling, despite making some terrible choices along the way. But I just can't help but root for him. So what do you think it is about Axel Greylark that makes him so loved?
Oh gosh, he is such a troublemaker. He is such a scoundrel. I mean, who doesn't love a scoundrel in Star Wars? So I think that's part of it. Somebody who doesn't conform to doing the right thing all the time and just being good all the time. I think it's sort of like is a really great, counterplay to the Jedi, who are always trying so hard to, be attuned to the Force and like, and do the right thing and be the light and life of the universe, right? And this guy is just like walking chaos, and he's beautiful and he's charismatic and he's screwing up all the time. But inside he's like he's a hurt person who's suffering and is making choices because of some of these things that he doesn't want to deal with. And I think a lot of people find a commonality with that, but are also sort of taken with his celebrity kind of charm and that sort of thing. I think it's that combination of the hurt little boy that you kind of want to fix, along with that charismatic, bright, shiny star you just can't look away from.
Can I just say also thank you for giving him a level of redemption without killing him off? That's such a Star Wars trope that's happened over the years. It's like someone will make one really good decision right at the end of their lives, and I was so relieved and scared that he was going to die, and I was glad that he did not.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, redemption shouldn't always be death, or like happen just before death. I wanted very much for him and Gela to continue to have a relationship and to strengthen their friendship, and not only during times of terrible disasters. And they will have time to do that. And so in my mind, he and Gela they're still chatting, they're still sort of yelling at each other, they're still yes, he's in, big spoiler, yes, he is in jail, but he does have that redemption, and I wanted that for him very much. And I think most people will find, hopefully will find that refreshing, that I didn't kill him off.
I certainly did. Well, the book is going to come out on April 4th. It will have come out before this video drops, but it's coming out right before Star Wars Celebration, which I believe you are attending.
Yes. So I will be at Celebration. I think I will be either in the air or landing on April 4th. So I may just not be on Twitter at all, because I might be either unconscious or incommunicado. So apropos of the High Republic, I will not be in communication for some period of time. But yeah, I'm so excited for people to read the book, to get to know Axel and Gela a little bit more. I can't wait for it. I just want people to re-immerse themselves in phase 2, because it's just been such a great ride.
What are you excited about at Celebration to be a part of the panel and to talk about phase 2 and whatever else comes up? I'm excited to go to that panel.
So I've never been to Celebration before. And it's been an incredibly long time since I've been to London. And so if you see me there, it's just sort of like with big eyes and kind of silent. It's just because I'm taking everything in, and I'm going to be walking through that just like literally starry eyed and being like, oh my God, look, there's Boba Fett. Oh, look at that. It's Din Djarin. I'm going to be like going, it's going to be amazing. So yeah, I'm going to have to force myself to remember to talk and converse with people like a normal person. It's going to be hard, because I'm going to be just totally starstruck and loving it. But I'm really interested to hear how the other authors are feeling now that their books are done and they are coming out, or they have come out, and like sort of their feelings with the wrap up of phase 2, and what kind of perspective they've had on the process. So I'm looking forward to hearing what they say.
Celebration is the best. This will be our 4th, and it's just people there to celebrate Star Wars, and there will be a big group of people there to celebrate the High Republic as well. So I hope you have a great time. I'm sure you will. I bet you'll find
so too. I hope so too. My dream, which may not happen at Celebration because the timing may be wrong, but my dream is someday to see a Kyung Greylark cosplay with like the headdress and the thing. And it's not going to be me, because I don't have time to put something together. But like and see some like Axel Greylark cosplays. Like, I can't wait. I would love to see that. So fingers crossed that maybe we see something like that, but we'll see.
The concept art has been out for a while for Kyung, so I think
it has. It's been out for a while, so people should get on that.
I've been seeing a lot of people on Twitter preparing their High Republic cosplays. A lot of them are phase 1 robes, but you never know. There might be a big surprise.
We'll see. It's my hope, but you never know.
I bet you can find a 2-1B cosplay there somewhere, or at least a droid someone's built.
Yeah. If not, I'll just carry my little guy around. I've got him up on my shelf. I'll just keep him in my pocket just in case.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today to talk about Cataclysm. If you haven't picked it up yet, I know we just spoiled some stuff, but you should absolutely read it. It's such a fun book, so intense. So thank you again, Lydia. Where can people follow you online? And what other books have you written that would you recommend to Star Wars fans that are not Star Wars books necessarily?
Sure. So you can find me. I'm on Twitter, Lydia Y Kang. I'm on Instagram at Lydia Kang. So you can find me there. Other books that I have written. I have another science, like out in outer space science fiction novel that's called Toxic, that I wrote several years ago, and I had so much fun writing. That book just wrote itself, and it's about a sentient spaceship, and a girl who was born on that ship and wakes up to find it abandoned. And so I had a lot of fun writing that, and I got to really dig into the science a little bit, and that was great. If you're into historical murder mysteries with a lot of science in them, or you're a Bram Stoker Dracula fan, I would recommend Opium and Absinthe. That's one of my favorite ones that I've written. So, but yeah, I kind of write a little bit of everything all the time. I'm all over the place, but there's probably something there for everybody.
That's great. Well, thank you again so much. Thank you, everyone that was watching and listening along, and may the Force be with you.
Thanks, Alex.